the Board of Acquisitions and Contracts is not a legislative branch. We don't have a government within a government. We have one legislative branch of government. That's the Board of Legislators. And to put someone on a quasi-legislative board and ignore the duly elected legislative branch of government's law that's been duly enacted, I think that's a travesty. And I believe that the county executive has a remedy if he believes the law is invalid. That remedy is to go to a court of law. That's why we have two branches of government. And that court of law will determine whether he's right or he's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've only been a legislator for a relatively short period of time, but I have to admit, in my various walks of life, I've never quite seen anything like this before. When there's a law duly passed and duly entered, people are supposed to follow it. They can go to court to challenge it. We also learned about something in law school called an injunction if people believe there's a serious problem with the law's operation in the short term. That's not being done here. And my colleagues can tell you about other situations where there have been efforts to ignore duly passed laws. I hope that this will be the last one, because this is not the way a government is supposed to operate. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Judy Myers, and I am Chair of Budget and Appropriations for the County Board of Legislators. One of the ways in which Westchester government works, in a nutshell, is that we do have the three branches of government. We have 17 legislators who are duly elected and represent the 1 million people who live in Westchester County. We also have a county executive system of county government, which has one county executive who is elected by the residents of the county to serve as the head of the executive branch. This Board of Acquisition and Contract that we're talking about, for anyone who finds it a little bit confusing at all or obtuse, is literally the last step in the process through which bills get paid, money flows through from the taxpayers into the county coffers, and then out to the goods and services and programs that the county has running in the county. To stop that process, or to have the process unduly weighted in one way or another, is, as one of the other legislators said, a travesty. It's also illegal. The people of Westchester who have elected us and have elected this county executive have a right and a need to know that this county executive is acting as if he believes he can pick and choose which laws to follow and which to ignore. This A&C legislation was duly passed, duly vetoed, and duly overridden. That means it stays in effect. This is not a choice that any county executive can make to ignore this law, to ignore any of our budgetary expenditure laws that are expressly written in our approved budget, or a law that impacts me personally in my district cannot disregard the laws requiring public hearings for when you're going to cut county bus service out from under your residents' behinds. You can't. This isn't how government works, and we cannot have a county executive who believes it should work this way. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. And again, it's pretty simple. We have a county charter, and in the county charter, it's simple. The county executive's job, number 6 in his job, is to enforce the resolutions, acts, and local laws duly adopted by the Board of Legislators in the state of New York. That is all we're asking for. We're not asking for everyone to laugh and have a giggle, etc. We just want the law followed. And again, if there's a problem, and the county executive certainly has remedies to do, as many of the folks have said today, they have an opportunity to go forward and go to court and challenge the law that's been enacted by the legislature on behalf of the people of Westchester. We're happy to take some questions. The county attorney's opinion is exactly that. It's an opinion. The lawmaking body sits behind this door. And when we make a law, if that law is passed and moves forward, that's the law. The county opinion attorney has zero weight, nothing. If he would like to have an opportunity to challenge the law, as Mary Jane Shimsky said, there's an injunction process. You can go to court. You can file activities. But right now, the law needs to be followed.
Let me just comment on that. I think that it is extremely disturbing that the county attorney, who is the attorney for the Board of Legislators and the county executive, would advise the county executive to violate a law enacted by the Board of Legislators. I think that places him in a very, very great conflict of interest, to say the least. I have never heard that. One who represents the Board of Legislators would advise that the law duly enacted by the Board of Legislators should be violated. That makes absolutely no sense. And if the county attorney believes that it is, then the county attorney should advise the county executive what the legal process is, which is to commence an action and have a judge decide. The county attorney is not a judge. He does not make any decisions on whether our law is valid or not. He can give an opinion. But in an opinion given in the midst of where you're supposedly representing a client, which is the Board of Legislators, that you're advising another party to violate the law of the very client that he is supposed to represent. That is a conflict.
Because what happens is that's what we do in the room here, right? That's what laws are about. You have an opportunity with legislative branches around the world that they sit in a group, they make up laws, and they could be signed by the executives, they could be vetoed by those executives, and they could be overridden, which this particular law is. That law is filed at the state of New York. It's the law. It's no different than the jaywalking law in the street. You cannot decide which laws you want to follow and which ones you don't. So it is not up to us to challenge the law. The county executive said he didn't like the law when it came out. That's why he did not give his approval, gave it in writing. The board overrid it. That's the end of the story. So it's up to him now. If he wants to fight that and he wants to waste the taxpayers' money in trying to ensure that a process that we modified so there'd be more openness and transparency in the Board of Acquisition and Contracts process, then let him do that. But the board doesn't have to take that action. We already did that.
I mean, imagine if every single legislature, first of all, who passed the law, then have to go to school to make sure that law gets enforced. What would we be as a democracy? Think about that.
No. We don't. No, we have a law. This is no different than the cell phone law. You know, there's people out there that don't agree with the cell phone law, right? Oh, wait, no. We do not have to challenge the law. We do not have to do that. The county executive wants to do that. That's right. We're the law-making body, right? So if the county executive feels the law is inaccurate, let him take it to court and say to the people of Westchester County that it's worth Westchester County's money. When we had 3 public hearings, a public permissive referendum period, and no one said a word that he's violating the law. Let him go forth and do that. Let him talk to the people that we have the millions of dollars of contracts that go through acquisition and contracts each and every week. Let him explain to those folks that their contracts may be invalidated because they were not done duly by the board as appropriate. So again, it's not noise barrier, and I think that's the question, that's the issue, right? What the public should be hearing is that there's a violation of the law and that there is no one above the law. So that's the situation. It's not, no. It's not an interpretation. It's not an interpretation. Go to the State Department right now. There's a law on the books. So it's not a question of interpretation of the law. So what happens today was that the board stood up and walked away from the table, and there was not an invalid group of people to vote on any of those contracts. And what we could deal with at that particular time is now we have to look and see which those contracts are and the ones that we need to agree on and move forward with 2 votes, which would just be the county executive or his representative, and or the Board of Legislators and our representative. But what should happen is that we should be tired of having this noise, as you said, Jerry, because I think all of us are frustrated with having a time where people simply just ignore the law. What he should do is he should just send the budget director to the meeting, and if he has a problem with it, go to court and straighten it out. If the budget director works for him. Well, what happens is the contracts. What should happen is that the contracts that may come out from that particular meeting session would be or could be invalidated. They could be challenged. We could challenge the contracts ourselves. Again, we sit here and we authorize the contract. No. We say we're not challenging the law. We already did. We may challenge specific actions on things that contracts that have moved forward where the board voted against. We may challenge specific contracts. I'm not sure what you thought. The contract that you talked about is the NIPA contract, which is the generator's contract. And the New York Power Authority is actually coming to the board to have a discussion to talk to us about what they are proposing to move forward with. It's a particular contract that we are concerned about to find out whether or not the county is spending $1 million more than it needs to, right? And again, under the cloak of a room where none of you were at, right? Some of you were there, but not most of you were at, where $1 million may have been expended in excess that we don't need to spend. Every time we talk about cutting programs or cutting bus lines and saying we're going to save $50,000 or $100,000, this is a case where $1 million may have been overspent, and we don't know. So that's kind of things. We're still waiting for that information that the Deputy County Executive said that they thought was resolved. Our budget staff has been trying to follow up on that particular question. We still don't have an answer from 2 weeks ago whether or not the people of Westchester's money is being inappropriately spent. On specific contracts, again, when we have it was a question because a lot of times the contracts are in front of A&C, the board approves at our level, and then it's moving forward. It's the last step, as Greg Myers said. But again, at this point in time, the county executive needs to just follow the law. It's just that simple. And if we do that, then there's not any drama, at least on that behalf. So we'll follow the law, and we'll see where it goes.
Let me see if this makes it a little easier to understand. The way we achieve transparency in government is by knowing how every single dollar flows from the taxpayer's pocket through the collector of the taxes and out to pay for what services those taxes are paying for. That has to be, in a democracy, that has to be a transparent process. Otherwise, you could have too much money being taken in or too little money being taken in or projects being paid for at whim, which is we don't want. That's not good for Westchester County. What we're asking for here is for the residents, the citizens of Westchester County to know that this money is not flowing through in a transparent way because of the way that this Board of Acquisitions and Contracts has been established. And we see a $13 million contract that had no vetting within the Board of Legislators. We saw 40 projects go through last week at I don't even have the full figure of how much each one was, but it's probably in excess of $40 million that there's no watch over. This should, frankly, be a lot of noise to Westchester County residents because this is Westchester County dollars. These are hard-earned dollars in a very, very highly taxed county that are moving through without transparency. Who knows if it's too much that's being taken out of our pockets? Everyone needs to know that.
I'm sorry. We already have filed our objections to that from when we rejected the application for the appointment of the Department of Transportation and Public Works Commissioner, which was done inappropriately and not following the process as outlined in the charter. So that was the position that the board had. We already voted that down. He is not a commissioner, right? He can be an employee of Westchester County, and as you were there, I said very clearly, no one is expecting the administration not to find some particular opportunity for Mr. Pisco, but it will not be commissioner. So again, the point from us, we even offered, as you know, I offered, and I said, you may want to get the assistant commissioner for that particular meeting. Again, for this part, it's very simple. The budget director works for the administration. Challenge it, do the process appropriately. The plan is very simple. We hope the county executive follows the law. That's all, right? Again, it's not that difficult. It's not even that hard for people out there to understand. Follow the law. The opinion, they have an option to do that. Go to court and get it resolved. And it's not, they don't need an opinion. They need to go to court and resolve it.
Well, I think that, first of all, we are a legislative branch. As we probably said this over and over again. We enact laws, and they are presumed valid. They are valid until a court says they're not. We don't need to go and challenge our own law. We don't need to validate. No, but what well, I'm not saying we're not going to do anything about it, but what I'm telling you, what we're explaining to you is that there's a process, and it would be inappropriate for us to go to a court and ask them to validate our own law. Because then what happens is that every single person around this county who decides to violate a law, whether it's a state law or not, the remedy would be for the legislature to go to court to say, validate our law. No. The remedy is for the executive. Now, the question is the county executive prepared to continue on and on with these unlawful actions of spending Westchester County taxpayers' money through these contracts, which are invalid, over and over? And that is, I think, the question that they need to answer. Whether or not they're going to continue to expend money, millions of dollars, millions of taxpayers' dollars, unlawfully, illegally, through contracts that are not properly approved. That's the question, I think, because every single one of those contracts that are passed is subject to challenge. Every single one of them. Well, we're keeping all of our options open. All of our options open, whatever they are. But for this point in time, what we are saying very clearly is that we are putting on notice that all of the contracts that have been improperly approved because of the fact that they're violating the law are presumed invalid. That's our position. Well, I think that the question should be asked of the county executive, whether that is what he said. Yeah. Well, we don't have to deal with a county executive who contends that we are wrong. Well, someone will. So at some point, it will. Eventually, the people of Westchester will. Yeah. We're not going to sit here. Let me say this to you, John. I don't think we're going to stand here and tell you, well, we are going to sue, or we're not going to sue, or we're going to what we plan to do. We take this one step at a time. The step right now is we passed the law. It's been violated. We pointed it out publicly, pointed out to the press. We've answered your questions to make it very clear to you what has occurred. It's up to you now to ask the other side. They said you violated the law. Why don't you go to a court? You are the executive. You are sworn to execute the laws of Westchester. Ask him. Why don't you, if you don't believe it's a law, why don't you go to a court and have a court declare it invalid, since you don't have the authority as the executive to declare the law invalid? That's a question properly posed to the executive branch of government, not the legislature.
Listen, there is no legislature in this country who can execute contracts or sign checks or direct action in executive departments themselves. We have two choices. Number one, we can make a law, which we did, and we made sure it was duly entered in all the places it was supposed to be after the appropriate amount of time. Then it's up to the county executive or whichever executive in whichever government you're talking about to execute that law faithfully. If they don't, it's up to the legislature to call them on it. It's then their step. They either challenge it the transparent and valid way, which is going to court, or they acquiesce in the law. If he continues to do what he's doing, as I said, we can't sign checks. We can't push these contracts through without him. All we can do is call on the people of this county to ask that the laws be faithfully executed so we can move forward and do the people's business. I know there have been instances, we all know what they are. There have been times where I've been incredibly frustrated in the last weeks and months trying to get the most routine actions of government done. And believe me, my colleagues behind me are just as frustrated as I am. Imagine, Jerry, a law is passed, a law is entered. You disagree with it, and you say, I'm ignoring it. You can't do that. He's got to either decide to challenge it in the legally correct way or follow it. Those are essentially his options.
Okay. All right, thanks so much. All right. Have a great afternoon.